Hello friends, we are going to be using a new medium today called scratch art. You will be needing a piece of paper, a pencil, a small scratch paper. It's black on one side and white on the other side. Your scratch tool made out of wood. And if you have any type of tape available, that would be useful too. We are going to be looking at positive and negative space today before we begin. The positive space is the white area and the negative space is the black area. So take a look at what you see, looking at the two pictures next to each other, but the positive and the negative areas are switched. You should see a vase in one and then two faces in the other one. For the next one, when you look at the negative space, you should see a key. And when you look at the positive space, the white space, you should see the city of Chicago skyline. What do you see when you look at the white positive space and the black negative space in this one? When you're making scratch art, the area that you scratch off becomes your positive space, and then the black space is your negative space. This student made their positive space into flowers. This student made their positive space into sea creatures and sea plants. And this student made their positive space into a butterfly. And I also like how they added the edge, the design around the outside. This example of a scratch art is more abstract and it just uses shapes as a design. And this artist created some snow owls out of their scratch art. So today we're going to start by practicing a few drawings and deciding which one we want to use for our scratch art. So let's start on white paper and a pencil to do some practice drawings. Sketches are just real quick drawings. So for your first sketch, begin with a shape of your choice. So I started with a diamond. Now go around the outside of your shape with the same exact shape. So I just put a bigger diamond around the outside. And then you can continue to add smaller diamonds on the inside or bigger diamonds on the outside or whatever shape you chose. This is called layering your shapes. Next, I added a cloud line in between. And I also added a zigzag line. And you can add other lines or shapes inside to add a bit more element of design. I even added some little circles on mine. And there's how my diamond shape turned out at the end. This time we're going to draw a thing. So I started with a spiral circle. This could actually be like a shell, but you can draw anything that you want for your next sketch. Next, I made my circle spiral into the sun by adding some flames looking like fire around it. You can try these same designs that I'm doing or go ahead and try your own designs. You can draw anything that you want. For the next one, pick an animal and draw an animal. So I am going to do a lion for my animal. So I did the triangles up top for the ears, and then I did the ovals for the eyes, and a triangle for his nose. Next, I added his whiskers, and finally a big mane around his head, just using straight lines going all around his head. Go ahead and try a sketch of whatever animal you want to draw now for yourself. And for my last sketch, I decided to do a dandelion, but you can do any plant or flower or person, anything that's living really for your last sketch. So I started with the stem and then an oval in the middle where the seed pod is, and then some straight lines coming out of it. I wanted it to look like a dandelion, the type that people can blow on and all the seeds blow away. So that's why I added the 3 lines, almost like a V with a third line there, and then the dots at the end of each. Those are the seeds to make it look more like a realistic dandelion. And then I drew some of those seeds actually blowing away. Go ahead and try a plant, a flower, a tree, a person, or something else that's living for your final sketch. And for this one, I wanted to add a message to it, so I added the word wish down at the bottom, because a lot of times people make a wish when they blow on a dandelion. You must have absolutely clean hands when you are handling the scratch paper, so make sure you go and wash your hands now if you haven't already done so. You need your scratch paper and your wooden tool next. And what I did was I taped down the 4 corners to my table that I'm working on. This way I did not have to touch my paper as much. You want to try and keep your fingers off of the scratch paper and keep it from moving with the tape. It's not necessary though if you don't have any tape. That's okay. Just try and hold it carefully with one hand. Go ahead and choose your favorite drawing from your sketches, and that's the one that you're going to put onto your paper. And you're going to hold your tool just like you would hold a pencil and begin by drawing the lines. These are the positive lines on whatever drawing you chose. So I decided to go with the lion. So I started drawing the outside of the lion's head, his nose, his mouth. Now I'm adding his eyes. And notice how I'm just using lines and drawing on the paper as if I'm doing it in pencil. You're using this tool to scratch away the black layer, and you're showing the color underneath it. And everybody's color underneath theirs is different. So mine is gold on this one, but everyone might have different colors. It was a variety pack. Next, I'm adding some smaller details into my picture, such as the whiskers and some details on his eyes, like his pupils. And now I'm adding some details onto his ears. The little hairs on his ears and the little hair on his beard are little touches to make him look more realistic. And finally, I add in his mane by adding those straight lines all around his head. When you're using the scratch tool, you're not leaving anything on the paper. You're actually taking off the black layer on your paper. So it's a little bit different than most of the materials that we've been using this year. And here is how my lion looked once I added all of the lines for the positive space. For the next step, you're going to want to color in, really scratch off, really use that tool to scratch off by coloring in certain areas. So I did that triangle on his forehead, and I did around the outside of his eyes. So you're going to want to go back now and make some of your lines thicker and bolder by tracing over them a few times with your scratch tool. So now I'm coloring in his nose, And by adding in these darker lines and coloring in some areas, it adds variety to your artwork instead of all of the lines being the same thickness. Now I am making the outside of his head, the lines darker. You can see how I really scratch over them to get them darker and show up more. And same thing around his ears. Now I'm adding some thickness to some of the hairs in his mane to make them show up more and to continue to add that variety to my artwork. When you think you're done, step back and look at it and see, is there any other areas you want to add more positive space to? If so, go back through with your tool and make those lines thicker and darker. Once you are finished, peel up the tape very carefully so that your paper does not rip. And you're finished. So I have one more piece of scratch paper here, so I'm going to show you another one of my designs, and this one is in a different color. For this one, I went around the outside of my whole paper using a cloud line. This line made a frame around the outside of my paper. Next, I added a stem. I used a curved line for my stem and then an oval at the top. So I'm going to go ahead and take my scratch tool and color inside to really scratch off that black layer. And this one is showing up rainbow colors, which is a little different than my last one. Next, I added those lines coming out of the seed pod. And I'm going to add a few more details. Notice how I'm just using thin lines to start with, and I'm going to go back and add some details and thicker lines at the end. Next, I am adding the details of the 3 lines looking like the shape of a V or a W with the dots at the end of each of these lines for the seeds. One of the tough things about using scratch paper is that there is no mistakes. So if you think that you've made a mistake, just keep going with it. You can go over it with a different shape or picture if you don't like what you see there. But there really is no way to erase a mark that you've made. So just go over a part that you don't like with something else over the top of it. This project is for you to be creative and you to express what you want to draw in your artwork. So don't feel like yours has to look like mine or that you have to do the same topics that I do. You can do whatever you want onto your scratch paper. I always like the surprise of using scratch paper to see what color it's going to be once you start scratching it away. I wanted to add the message at the bottom of wish, but you could also add other words, or you could include your name at the bottom. It's always a great idea to include the artist's name on the artwork, which is you. And here is how my scratch art turned out. I cannot wait to see what things you come up with and the beautiful designs that you create on yours.